Hi, I'm Andrea Anderson with Team Disability. I recently did the Buff Betty Adventure Race in Virginia. It was at the Shenandoah River State Park, and it's an all-women's race put on by Adventure Addicts Racing. Liz and Michelle Fouché do a great job with this race and all of the others that they put on. The points are always where they're supposed to be. The maps are impeccable. The swag is really fun. The atmosphere, especially in this one, is always really empowering. There was over 100 women at this race, and there was a 6-hour option and a 10-hour option. And there were a lot of people that are new to adventure racing and a lot of people that have done it for a while, like myself. So I was glad to get to do the race this year. Last year I was not able to do it, and shortly after that I put out a video kind of sharing my top 5 things that I do when I navigate. And you can look back at that video if you want. I'm going to go over all those 5 things really briefly in this video, but I thought it'd be more fun this year to share the mistakes that I made, and hopefully you'll learn from them. I have my top 5 mistakes that I think are pretty common and a bonus mistake at the end, and hopefully you'll get something out of it. So let's get started. The first thing I do when I get the maps, and these maps we got about 2.5 hours before the race started. So that's a lot of time with the maps, especially for a 10-hour race. So with one caveat though, there were 2 maps for the 10-hour race, and we did not receive the second map until TA3. So what you're looking at now is the one and only map we got ahead of time, and it has 3 different legs on it. There's the bike leg, and then there was a trekking leg, and then there was a paddle leg, and then we got our second map at TA3. So you get your maps, you get your rule book. I'd say the first thing you should do always is read the rule book. So I do that first, then I glance over at the maps. I first look at the legend just to make sure that I'm on the lookout for the right things, so that I can understand what these dark green things mean. Sometimes it's intuitive, but sometimes it's not. So it's good to know what you're looking for and what you want to steer clear of. Like marsh is always a questionable area if you want to go through that or not. The other thing I look at is the scale. So here at the bottom of the map is the scale. It's a 1 to 15,000 scale, which is somewhat uncommon. I would say that most orienteering events are 1 to 10,000 and sometimes as small as 1 to 5,000. And a lot of adventure races are maybe 1 to 24,000. So 1 to 15,000 is not that common, but it is a fun scale. It's kind of right in the middle there. And you can see that each grid mark, there's 500 meters between grid lines. So you won't easily find a tool that you can buy of that scale, but you can always make your own. So you can either cut this off the bottom of the map, or you can take your own piece of paper, and mark some tick marks on it every 100 meters. And what I like to do is, if I'm making my own, we have these self-sealing laminating pouches that are business card sizes. And so you cut off your part of the map that you want to use and put it inside there, and it's a hard card that is easy to pull in and out of your pocket, a little bit easier than paper. So I think that's a fun tip. So the other thing is, it should be obvious, but it's not always. This 1 to 15,000 scale is metric. So it actually means that 1 centimeter is equal to 150 meters. And if you have a compass like mine and a lot of others, you'll see that there's a ruler on the edge, and on this side I have centimeters, on this side I have inches, but the centimeters can tell me. I can use this as my map tool to show me at least easily what 150 meters is. It's a little bit hard to do the math though in your head if you're trying to do half of 150, 75. Anyway. Either way, you can use that and it's helpful. The next thing I look at is the declination, and it's small on this map right over here. It says magnetic north, In other maps, you might see something like this, but you'll see another arrow coming off one direction or the other that indicates what the declination is. So you didn't need to use that for this race, and you don't really need to know what it all means right now, but look it up. It's important. If there is some declination indicated, I always suggest to get a compass that you can declinate. This one, you have a little key and there's like a little screw in the back that can turn this little red shed to however many degrees you need to use a declinated compass. Otherwise, you're adding or subtracting in your head every time you're using it, which it's hard for me to keep everything straight in my head when I'm navigating. So anyway, I look at those things. Once I've looked at those things, I then highlight every CP and I highlight them in order. I use a yellow Sharpie. It seems to work a lot better than when we had been using marker highlighters or even the gel highlighters. The Sharpie does not smear. It doesn't have any problem getting wet. So I highlight every CP in order just in case I don't want to miss one. Sometimes these numbers will fade, blend in with the background and then you miss a number and that's no good. So I do that in order. I highlight all the CPs. This time I highlighted the bike CPs in yellow and then I went back over the top of the Trek ones in orange just so I could keep that straight in my head too. So once I've done that, then I kind of look at the race flow before I make the route. So I can tell, this is also from the rule book too, it'll say leg 1 is biking, leg 2 is trekking, and I can tell it goes over to this paddle put in, and then I need to paddle all the way over here. There's only one CP for the paddle, so I tried to make that kind of obvious so I wouldn't forget it. And then the takeout is up there at TA3. So that was the flow. And then I start thinking about the route. The route is just probably where you want to spend most of your time. And there's always a lot of things to consider when you're deciding what direction to go through, what order to go in. The rule book stated that we had to go to CP number 1 first, and then all other points could be gotten in any order. So I decided that the best way for me was going to be to come around this direction, do CP9 as an out and back, and then come back here. So that's kind of a little loop. And then I was going to do this other side as a bigger loop so that I didn't have to go back up this hill. I was going to come down this way and then make my way to the TA. I think that worked out pretty good had I not made some mistakes that I'll tell you about in a little bit. But I highlighted the route I thought I would take. The other thing I did is I darkened the intersections. So there is several here that I used just a fine tip Sharpie to make sure I saw those intersections. These trails kind of blend in with the topo lines. So especially you can imagine if you're riding your bike and looking down at a map board, it's kind of hard to see those details. So I darkened in the trail intersections that I wanted to make sure not to miss. And I think that's about, okay. Oh, and then obviously I had time to write in the clues and there was space for them. A lot of times you won't have space to write them in here, and the clues are also in the race book. So it's kind of an extra step. But if you have time, it means you don't have to be checking it that much during the race. So I wrote my clues in. I always write them north up so that if you've got your map folded, that's another clue that, just keeps your head straight, that if you've written them in north up, you know that north is that direction. So then if I have time, I kind of look to see if there's any key distances that I want to mark in and measure. I didn't do any for this race. Maybe I should have, because one of my mistakes, I think, started early, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. So you can write in distances too before the race starts. So now that my map's ready, I think I'm ready to just give you a quick overview of those top 5 navigation considerations that I put in my video last year. The first consideration I take into mind is whether I should bushwhack or not. Sometimes I'll see an opportunity that will cut off some time, hopefully, if I bushwhack instead of use the trail. So I'm going to use the CP3 as an example for these 5 things that I think are good to keep in mind. So there is a trail here on the south, and there's a trail here on the north. So I didn't want to do any backtracking. I wanted this whole segment to be a big loop. So when I looked at this, getting from CP2 over here to CP3 means I would have to go to if I stay on the trail, I'd have to go to the intersection and then come back down and then back up. So in my mind, that just was not a good option. So I thought bushwhacking would be the best way to go. Michelle did say you needed to take your bike to every point because it's a bike leg. So what I thought that meant is I could not drop my bike here and bushwhack down to go get it and then come back. So even though my map is highlighted this way, I actually went, once I got here, I bushwhacked to the point that was right on the trail, and then I took the trail back up this way to keep going. So I never actually did any backtracking. So that was an example of bushwhacking. I don't know if it saved a lot of time, but it was fairly clear, and I assessed the situation when I got there. So the next thing I consider is what's my backstop, and or if there's a guardrail. So to me, when I was coming down this trail, my backstop is this intersection right here. I know that if I get to this intersection, I've gone too far and I need to go back. So it's good to have a backstop just to stop you from, making a really much bigger error. An example of a guardrail too is as I'm coming down this spur, I want to make sure that I have the reentrant on my right. So a reentrant is just where any water would re-enter a stream. So sometimes it'll have water in it. Sometimes it'll be dry. It was dry this time of year, and the higher up you go in a reentrant, the less likely you're going to see water in it. So anyway, so that is a backstop and guardrail. The third thing I think of is whether I need to aim off or not. So in this situation, I didn't really feel like I needed to, but it wouldn't hurt. So there could be a situation where if you were coming at this and, the point was on the trail, so it's a little less necessary. But if I were afraid that I was going to get into the wrong reentrant, I could aim a little bit to the left, a couple degrees, to make sure that once I get to the reentrant, I know that I need to travel downward. This isn't a great example for that, but I'll show another one when I talk about my mistakes. And also the fourth thing is look at the terrain. I already mentioned a couple of features to keep in mind. That there's going to be a reentrant on my right. I want to be going down a spur, and I want to be going down. That's good to note. Like if you think you're supposed to be going down and the map says you're supposed to be going down, there shouldn't be any situation where you're going up. So I consider the terrain, and also whether that's more or less important than the compass direction. I didn't mention that at all, but I think that's first and foremost. You need to know what direction you should be going. So then number 5 is a measurement. So I would say, although I didn't measure it, that might be around 150, maybe a little more. So if I need to go 150 meters, I could pace count that. That's going to be kind of tricky when you're bushwhacking and you've got a bike with you. So, pace counting is not going to probably be the best option. I could time it and say, okay, 1 minute per 100 meters is what we sometimes use when it's fairly flat. And if there's much elevation or there's bushwhacking, we sometimes use 1.5 minutes for 100 meters. Either way, I also had this trail here, which is yet another backstop. If I got to the trail and the point's not there, then, I've gone too far basically. So I had a lot of things there that I didn't feel like I needed to keep track of the distance that much. But it's good to keep in mind. So those 5 things, should you bushwhack? What's your backstop? Should you aim off? What's the terrain like? And, how far do you have to go in that direction? All right, so that's the top 5 things you consider. So now let me talk about my top 5 errors that I think are pretty common. All right, the first big nav error I think anyone can avoid is that I did not take the time to make a good decision. So that was from the get-go. So at the beginning of the race, we had to ride around and make it to CP number 1 first. And of course, I get a little flustered because there's someone right on me. Like there was a prologue was the mini crossword from the New York Times. It was fun and quick, and so I got off of the start line really quickly. But then I came around and I think I turned a little bit early. So I came around here. I think I turned a little bit early. Right at this intersection, Becky Lamont pulls up right beside me. And we said a couple of things to each other. Like we both were a little bit surprised, but not so much knowing that we had gone through this campground. So I'm like, yeah, we probably need to go up here and take a left. So I go up here and we both take a left. That's where I did a lot of things wrong. But the biggest thing I did wrong is I didn't stop and look at the map close enough. I just was in a hurry. I was like, I just have to go. This person is right here. I'm already flustered. My heart rate's really high because we biked around this and the race has just started. And I already feel like the map is not making sense. But in my head, I'm like, all I have to do is go down here and take a left. Well, I took a sharp left. And the way this looked in real life, I just needed to keep straight. But I didn't stop. And of course, on a bike, it's a little bit harder to see quickly. You're going pretty fast. So I should have just stopped and figured it out and just let her go by. Like, who cares? It's a 10-hour race. It's not like these few seconds are going to make a big difference. But I was just flustered. So I did take that left. We both did. Somehow I got in front, and she must have turned back at some point. She realized our error much earlier than I did. I came down this trail. I must have passed the CP here that was right off the trail. It was visible from the trail. I came all the way up here to where there's a horse barn and parking lot, and there's an intersection there. I mean, I'm really glad that I darkened my intersection. But I was like, what is going on? I had no idea where I was, and then I had to just completely regroup. I realized I'd been traveling east instead of west. I realized I should have passed that CP, but I didn't see it, so I was still a little bit confused. All I could do is go back to the known, to this intersection, and figure out what I did wrong. So in other words, you have to slow down to make good decisions. That's the first error that I think is pretty common. Is like, you get your heart rate up and you get your competition near you, and it's easy to just gloss over the decision you're making when you might just need to slow down. Okay, so the next common nav error that I made is prioritizing one navigational technique over another. Like ideally, you're taking all of this information in, you're using every little bit of information you have. But let me show you on map 2, these points down here between 25 and 26, it doesn't seem like it should be so hard. I could travel straight down this reentrant and get the point. In my mind, I thought, well, sometimes reentrants are kind of steep and they're kind of cluttered. I want to go down a spur instead. So I think to myself, I just have to follow the spur down. I did do a little bit of looking at my compass to make sure that I was going the general right direction. But that didn't work for me. So when I thought I was coming down this spur, I thought I was going to come right down to it. But as you can see by the map, there's kind of a square area right here. It's actually kind of flat-ish. And when I took off from the CP, in my mind, I thought I just have to keep the reentrant on my left. Well, I did do that. I kept I kept a reentrant on my left, and it was pretty clear and open, and I started running. So once again, I'm going fast, and I'm just ignoring what I should be paying attention to the most, which is my compass, and I'm just looking at features. So I prioritized features over the compass direction, and so I end up in this reentrant over here, and I end up pretty confused. So I did take a bearing on this reentrant and noticed that it's going, pretty much north-south. I wanted it to be going east-west, so that told me a little bit more of where I was, and I thought, well, I just have to go down because everything's leading down to the water here. So as long as I go down, I can figure out what's going on. So I did go down and I hit this trail, I regrouped, and I realized I have to go up here. So I'm going to show you the tracker. That's always kind of fun to see. This is the tracking site, and it feels a little bit jumbly because the trek leg and the bike leg were on top of each other, which you might think is not exciting, like you're in the same area, but you'd be surprised how different things can look from the trail as opposed to on foot. So a lot of these points, there was no reason to be on the trail. So it felt like a totally different area of the park, even though it wasn't. So anyway, here's CP25. Like I said, I was trying to go down this spur to get to 26. And what I did was I went down this spur completely off, completely in the wrong direction. I had to go all the way down to the water primarily and get to that trail to realize I need to head up this direction. My tracker didn't actually hit the circle. I think if you scroll out, it does. But anyway, that's that next mistake, prioritizing the wrong thing. And prioritizing, I pretty much ignored all of the other techniques besides terrain, which was a mistake. Okay, so these next couple of mistakes, almost all of these mistakes, are basically forgetting to do one of the 5 things I'd said earlier. So not aiming off. So here's a mistake I made from CP20 to CP21. So it's a little bit easier to tell by this map how I made that mistake. It's less easy to tell on the actual race maps. But so this is my track. And I was coming over here. It kind of threw me off a little bit that I had to, get another bearing from here to the point. And in my mind, I was going straight for it using my compass. I was trying to, keep track of the terrain as well. But for whatever reason, I drifted left. Well, since I thought I was going straight to it, I wasn't sure if I should go left or right. So I chose one, and it's 50% chance in my mind, since I thought, well, I should have landed right on it. I decided to go left when I should have gone right. But had I aimed off, in other words, if I had meant to do this, which I didn't, I would have known that I should go right. And on the maps, let's see, that was CP 20 to 21 right here. So I came from basically this building and kind of came through here. The vegetation got a little bit thick. Maybe that's partially what made me go off to the left. And for some reason, it was kind of tight in here, I guess. I'm thinking that's why I went left instead of right. I'm not sure why I didn't realize to go right. But I do know that I forgot to aim off there, and I was just going straight for it. And once I got to the feature I thought I should see it at, I didn't know which direction to go. So forgetting to aim off is my 3rd mistake. All right, so my 4th mistake, which I think is pretty common, is forgetting to keep track of distance. So the example I have in the mistake I made is here at CP 12. So this was in the second leg that was a trek section. And we needed to come around here. And I had been thinking about whether I should bushwhack here or not. It didn't seem that far. But when I got there, the vegetation was head high. There was some briars. It's hard to tell if it was going to be mushy or marshy in there. So I didn't do that. So I came down here. But somewhere along the way, I realized that I'd forgotten to get CP 11. Big mistake. And I was so bummed about that. I mean, I was glad that I remembered, and I'm not sure how I remembered, but it had me flustered. And let's just say, when I got to this intersection, I was thinking about what to do, and I just assumed I would see the point, even though the clue is inside thick vegetation west of trail. So I don't know. I just ignored that, I guess. And even though there's a little bit of a bend in the trail there to also tell me that would be a good place to look for a CP, I didn't. And I just kept going. I wasn't really paying attention to how far. I never measured a distance. And I really wish I had, because look at the tracker. Over here is where it is. So I came around, I came up here, there's the point. And I went that far out of my way before realizing I can't, I must have missed it. I've got to turn around. So I should have measured my distance, and I didn't. That is error number, what was that? Number 4. Kind of forgetting to get a number. That's another error. I just don't think it's necessarily that common. That's just me being dumb. So I got that point. I had to go back all the way back up there. I mean, it added, I don't know, a kilometer maybe. I know it put me behind. I had to do the run of shame because I passed people this way and then I had to see them again this way. Oh, well, that's what happens. Okay, and my 5th most common mistake, well, I think it's common, and it was the 5th mistake I made in this race. Or one of the 5 mistakes. I probably made even more than that. But I did not read the instructions. Close enough. I told you I did that at the beginning of the race. I should have done that at the beginning of the race. Maybe I did. I don't know. But at some point I decided the rule book wasn't that important. So I didn't look. And there's a trail right here going up to CP 39. This trail right here, let me show you on the maps. Maybe it'll make it look a little bit more like I felt it was. Yeah, this tells a little bit more of the tale. CP 39 is way up here, and it's the furthest point north, the furthest point, is it the furthest point? Yeah, it's the furthest point east as well. So, and I've been to this park before, so I've been up to this point, and I know this trail right here is really steep. You can see how close together the topo lines are. And the trail does go up the spur, which is slightly less steep than just, going straight up to it. But like I'd said earlier, I thought I had to take my bike to every point. But if I had read the rules, it said that I could drop my bike anywhere along the trail that I wanted to. Well, too bad I made that mistake, because I took my bike all the way up there. I was able to ride it down, but if you'd seen this trail, you would know that didn't save me much time, because it's really chunky. It's got some like shelves almost, like they're just jaggedy, rocky things that you see in the Appalachians, and it's a clunky ride. I was able to ride it, but it's not a quick, fast flowing thing by any means. And I should have read the rule book. I felt so dumb when I realized that I took my bike up there and I didn't have to. So that was the 5th thing that, mistake that I think is pretty common. I think all 5 of those are pretty common. Most of those, if I just kept in mind our navigation process, compass bearing, your backstop and your guardrails and aiming off and the terrain and how far you should go. If you keep those things in mind, none of those mistakes happen, really. Of course, you still can get flustered making a bad decision, or Or, yeah. Anyway, those are the top 5. I said I'd tell you a bonus mistake that I did not make this time, but I think is also very common. And it is that sometimes there won't be a trail in real life that's on the map, or vice versa. There'll be a trail in real life, but it's not on the map. And that's a pretty challenging situation because you have to have all of your other navigational tools at hand to determine, where you are if you see a trail that's not supposed to be there. So in this race, there was one point that on the map right here, CP6, there's no trail on the map, but the clue says on Pollinator Trail. And Michelle is really nice, and she told us that there is a trail to CP6. So had I not been told that would have been pretty challenging to determine. And usually you just have to keep all of the other things in mind. Like if you see a trail that comes up, you're thinking to yourself, if you're coming along here and you're thinking, oh, I got to take my first left, but then you see your first left is to this pollinator trail that's not on the map. If you were keeping track of your distance, you would know you haven't gone far enough yet. So anyway, I think that's just a pretty tricky situation when something's either not on the map or not there in real life. So those are, hopefully that'll help you make good decisions and improve your nav. The one thing I didn't tell you, how to get yourself out of a pickle. I mean, obviously you use all those tools, but one thing I like to do is orient the map. And let me show you how to do that really quick. Okay, this is going to be kind of tricky, but I'm going to try to show you what I do when I am just completely lost. Usually, I hope my camera is cooperating. You kind of see my bedroom in the background sometimes. Anyway, to orient the map, that's how I usually get out of anything that I'm having a hard time with, is I orient the map. So what that means is I want to put the map in real life facing the direction that it should be so that I can compare the map to what I'm actually seeing. So I have my map here and I have my compass, and I just make sure north is facing up, and then I put the compass flat on my map, and I want north to be facing north on the map. So I line up either the edge of my compass as long as it's facing north, or you can line up the lines underneath the bezel, line up those lines with the grid lines of the map. So now you know your compass is aligned with your map. So I've done that now. And then once you have it aligned, now you can rotate your map until the red is in the shed. Okay, so now I've done that. Ta-da! My map is now oriented. Somewhere in the world, life looks just like this. Obviously, it doesn't look like this in my bedroom. But if you're out in the wilderness and you have the map oriented, there should be somewhere on the map that looks exactly like what you're seeing. And if it's not, then you've got to find out where you are, and that's one of the best ways to do it. I hope that helps. So I think that's about it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, direct message me through Facebook. Also, join the Women of AR Facebook group. It's a great resource, and we're always hoping to get more women into the sport. And give navigating a try. It's just so much fun. And it's not that hard. The basics are not that hard. It's still pretty easy for me to make mistakes, obviously, but who's perfect? We all learn from our mistakes, and hopefully you learned something from mine. And thanks for watching.